A massive trade is incoming for the Toronto Maple Leafs following Nick Robertson's request away from Toronto, and a recent report has revealed a very interesting suitor that the Leafs could look to trade Robertson in exchange for, and this player would make a huge impact for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm going to break all that down in this episode, but before we do, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed, the large percentage, about 70% of you aren't subscribed to the channel, go hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to Darius and myself as we produce daily Leafs content. But Darius, there's a lot to go over today. And wow, Nick Robertson is still a Toronto Maple Leaf as of this moment. We know Brad Treliving came out and revealed that they're going to try to keep him on the team, but it seems like at this point, all signs are pointing to him going elsewhere, going and traded to another team. And a suitor has been revealed that we have not personally covered on the channel that is very interesting. So let's not waste any more time. And Darius, that suitor is the Columbus Blue Jackets. You can see here, new. Nick Robertson is reportedly asked out of Toronto, which we all know, and the Columbus Blue Jackets should be on the phone right now trying to get him. And we've done a few trade videos in the past speculating about Boone Jenner last season. And now we're looking at Nick Robertson here for Boone Jenner and a potential swap. And this one's very interesting. You can see this. Adam Perteau mentioned Columbus as one of the 3 teams he'd like to swing a trade for Robertson. He said the Blue Jackets are in the early stages of another major rebuild, and that means there's going to be some juggling within the roster. And if Columbus GM deals the veteran forward Boone Jenner, a spot in the Jackets' top 6 would open up and pressure. It would be a good spot for the Blue Jackets to rebuild. And the Leafs, again, were linked to Boone Jenner back at the trade deadline, I believe it was. Yep. And now it still makes sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, it does. And I think it makes a lot more sense. And we'll get to the Leafs side of things in a second. But if you look at Columbus, this makes a lot of sense, right? They're rumored to be trading away Patrick Laine, who wants a change in scenery. And Nick Robertson could get a really good opportunity on a team like this, right? Because, again, they're rebuilding. He could probably play top 6 minutes on a team like this. They have a new GM. They have a new coach. Like I said, they want to trade Laine. It could make a lot of sense for Columbus. But when you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs side of things, I don't know who you're going to trade for on that team. Obviously, like you mentioned, Boone Jenner, when I look at it on paper, I think that would be great. I think underratedly, the Leafs actually need another centerman, right? Right now, I think Max Domi is kind of penciled in, or maybe Pontus Holmberg into that third line center role, but I'm not sure it's going to end up that way, right? Because there's lots of talks of David Kampf being traded as well. So I'm not sure that it's going to end up that way. So I think this could be a really good depth option for them at third line center position. But when you look at the salary cap, we'll get to it in a second. I don't know how that works. I feel like there would have to be more moving pieces, or the Leafs would have to make a trade prior to this one to make it work. So pretty interesting prospect of a trade, but it makes a lot of sense for Columbus. Not sure it makes too much sense just in terms of salary for the Leafs, but Boone Jenner could really help the Leafs, especially in that role.
Yeah, Bertuzzi's gone. The Leafs need really players like Boone Jenner at this point. They aren't going to light up the stat sheet or anything like that, even though he did have 22 goals in 58 games. But he's also a veteran guy. He's 31 years old. Nick Robertson is obviously much younger at 22, a 9-year age difference there. But if you're the Leafs, you'd be trading a prospect now for a guy who's NHL ready. And not saying Nick Robertson isn't NHL ready, but he would fit into the Leafs, I think, a bit better if they're trying to win now and capitalize on that window over the next few years. But on the flip side of things, there's also a world where they trade for Boone Jenner and Nicholas Robertson goes to the Blue Jackets and outperforms Boone Jenner. There is a world where that happens because of what he's shown flashes of. But I think I agree with you. The cap is very interesting. We can kind of dive into that as well. And you can see there's just a lot of linkage between the Blue Jackets and the Leafs regarding Brad Treliving trading Nick Robertson. But there's a lot of prospects that he could also choose from without sacrificing too much of the future. And you mentioned that from the insider's perspective of a Columbus Blue Jackets insider, they don't want to send out a first-round pick, which makes sense because it'd probably be top 10. I don't think the Leafs are going to get a first-rounder back for Robertson, even though that's probably what his value should be from the Leafs side of things. And you're looking at a lot of the different guys that Columbus has that the Leafs could look to get in a potential package. Do any of these stand out to you? Again, Boone Jenner makes the most sense depending on how you get the salary cap to work. Maybe they do some crazy stuff. Maybe it's a bigger trade. They throw Timothy Liljegren in there. I don't know. They could do a bunch of different things. But regarding a Boone Jenner for Robertson swap, it makes tons of sense for Columbus. It makes sense for the Leafs personnel-wise, but getting that done would require a bit of juggling with the cap and just to make it make sense for the Leafs as well. I'm not entirely sold on Brad Treliving wanting to give up a 22-year-old for a 31-year-old at this point.
No, and I think personally the best course of action is to try and mend that relationship. I think Nick Robertson should stay at Toronto Maple Leaf and they should figure out a contract. I think that would be the best course of action because I think this player's ceiling is a lot higher than what we think. He has not been given a good opportunity. And I think with a new coach, we might be seeing a different player here, especially if he stays healthy as well, because that's been a problem in the past too. But when you're looking at a potential trade to the Columbus Blue Jackets, the only guy there that I think value-wise makes sense to come back to the Leafs would be Boone Jenner, right? Because Nick Robertson value right now, the fact of the matter is it's not that high, right? So Boone Jenner is the only one that really makes sense. Maybe you can get something out of it. But like when you talk about prospects too, and that, you know, the article was mentioning prospects, it doesn't make sense to me. If you're going to trade away Nick Robertson, you need a player who can play in the NHL. You don't need prospects right now because Nick Robertson can play in the NHL and can produce, right? We saw it last year, and I think he can still produce at a high level and he'll do it somewhere else. So if you're trading Nick Robertson, it has to be for somebody who can play in the NHL. You can't trade him away for draft picks or futures or anything like that because it just doesn't make sense. You need somebody on the roster now, right? So the only one who would make sense, like I said, again, would be Boone Jenner, but that's on paper. That's personnel wise. I'm not sure how they get the salary cap to work. Maybe some retention there because again, Columbus is rebuilding. They want younger talent, right? I'm not sure, you know, if it's, you know, a totally great fit for them, but yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for the Columbus Blue Jackets and Leafs personnel wise.
Yeah, I think if you look at Nick Robertson, and again, I brought up his stats a few times here, he has, he was put in Keith's dog cage for most of the year. He's been playing on and off, and he still managed to put up 14 goals in 56 games, even though he was on and off the entire year playing, getting healthy scratched, all these things. If you're the Columbus Blue Jackets, and like you mentioned, they are rebuilding, taking a flyer on a guy who's 22 and can fit right into where Boone Jenner once was. Obviously, in this case for the Jackets, he was a third liner. But for Boone Jenner, he could fit into the Leafs, whether you put him on the second line, third line, wherever it is. He'd help replace what they lost in Tyler Bertuzzi, and ultimately, mainly, what they're losing in Nick Robertson, assuming they want to get rid of him. Because, Darius, we made a video on it 2 weeks ago when free agency opened up, and they still have yet to fix their forward issue, I guess. And I know a lot of Leafs fans are out there saying that all they lost was Tyler Bertuzzi, which is true in itself. But for one that wasn't good enough to win a playoff series, yes, they've obviously improved their defensive core, but they're also losing Nick Robertson now. And not only that, John Tavares got a year older, and a lot of these things are happening. Mitch Marner, the situation is still there, so they need to make improvements on that front. And I just think that Boone Jenner makes a ton of sense. The issue is they have yet to make any other changes or any other moves. And if Bertuzzi ends up leaving and Nick Robertson ends up leaving, you need to get a guy who's NHL ready. And Boone Jenner is just that. And that's why this trade makes a lot of sense for both sides. But I don't even know if they could be done with just Boone Jenner after that. I think they still need to make a subsequent move.
Yeah.
Obviously, they brought back Max Domi, but it's getting to a point where I want to see them significantly upgrade their third line, even their fourth line, maybe get rid of David Camp. That opens up some space for some other players as well.
Yeah, exactly. They need to upgrade, I think, at the top six position, but they're not able to because of the salary cap. And one thing a lot of people are forgetting on all of this is they're adding offense in the back end too. A lot of the defensemen that they signed will add some offense because they had none of that last year, especially in the playoffs. Zero, right? So they've added that. So that'll help, but you're losing Tyler Bertuzzi, right? He had a great second half that produces a lot of points, like you mentioned, right? So getting a guy like Boone Jenner, he's not going to put up a ton of points, but he would help with something like that. And I think personally in a third line center role, that'd be great, but you have to move salary out for that to make any sense. And again, when you're moving on from Nick Robertson, like you can see here, like I think if he's not put on, you know, in the doghouse by a coach, if there's a little bit of trust there between him and the coach, and, you know, given a better opportunity and playing a little bit higher than where he was last year, this player can score, I'm telling you. So I think there's a lot left to Nick Robertson. So out of all of this, I think the best course of action is to fix that relationship. But if they can't do that, this could be an interesting fit for sure. But I think a lot of things would have to happen for this to happen, for the salary cap to make sense heading into the season.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do with this and if they ultimately make a trade with any team. But I hope they keep him. But a Boone Jenner, I guess, consolation prize wouldn't be too bad. And the Leafs need to add some more offense. Obviously, OEL helps a lot in that front. But we said the same thing about John Klingberg last year, and we saw how that worked out. So they need to add some more forwards. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on that. We'll see you soon.